of libertynation.com. I am your host, Scott D. Cosenza, and joining me today, as in most days, is my podcasting partner and doctor, Timothy Elting Donner. That's right, Tim. Before you say another word, in absentia, I have awarded you the Doctor of Podcast Science. And before you say another word, as a surprise, a special surprise, you get along.
I don't like surprises coming from you.
You get a. No, that's not nice. I've given you many nice presents of surprises over the years.
Yeah, okay, true.
You get a certificate suitable for framing. So if you check your,
not for use, but for framing.
If you check your Slack channel now, I will play the music. You can enjoy your valedictory. Do you see your certificate, sir? Please check.
Uprising College of Podcasting Knowledge awards this degree to Timothy Elting Donner. And now I can officially be Dr. Donner. You know, it's funny because my father has a PhD, and we used to
kill this music. Hold on. Okay, there we
go. We used to kid him about being Dr. Donner and all that stuff. And, you know, you stole my line. I was going to do the Dr. Cosenza thing because I don't have to make something up for you because you do have your Juris Doctorate. But, you know, the standards are different now, Scott, with Dr. Jill Biden, who somebody very popular and well-known has said would make an excellent Surgeon General. Now, whether she becomes that or not, I mean, that honorific is something that's now been, you know, validated for a broader audience. And Scott, if I were you, I would pounce on the opportunity and present yourself as Scott. See, now I don't like the D in the middle because it makes it sound like it's Scott D. Cosenza.
We've been over this,
Tim. Correct. I know.
You got to get a time machine and take it up with Mom. You know, she gave me the middle name. So what can I say?
Doctor. Okay, Doctor.
You too, Tim, are also Dr. Donner of the Podcasting Science, and that is good for
what is
all credit. We ask all other podcasts.
Please extend all podcasting courtesy.
That's exactly
to Mr.
right,
Donner. Yes.
No, not Mr. To Dr. Donner, Tim, because you have.
See, even I have to get used to the magnitude of that designation.
When you think of the hours spent podcasting, the technical knowledge and expertise and review and preparation, Tim, it's no wonder that you've earned the doctorate. And just like Jill Biden, I think you should just use it like in podcasts. You know, you don't trot it out. You don't put it on your Christmas cards necessarily, right? Oh no, I'm sorry. Wait, I'm wrong. That's exactly the opposite. You see, Jill Biden, and for people who don't know, the tempest in the teapot, which is overflowing from the teapot, is that Jill Biden has put herself out there to be called Dr. Biden. She's not a medical doctor. She earned a doctorate of education from the University of where, Tim?
Well, if it's the same as her husband, it would be Delaware State, which is a bit confusing because it's an all-black college. But
you've thoroughly
wasn't
confused
it Delaware State or
for people
Joe Biden? But Joe Biden said he got a degree from Delaware State, which is all black, but they made an exception for him apparently. But they have no record of it. Sorry.
For people who don't know that story, Joe Biden, in one of his many, many gaffes that was not reported well by the big box media, said that he was a graduate of Delaware State University, which, as Tim says, is a historically black college and university, of course. And he didn't go there except for maybe to, deliver a speech or something like that. But he didn't attend the university.
To get votes.
Yeah. But Dr. Jill did attend the University of Delaware, which is where she got her doctorate. She got her.
I think they're the mud hens, aren't they?
The
Delaware.
blue hens,
I think
Tim.
they are. No, seriously.
Tim, they're the blue hens, Tim.
Oh, the blue. Sorry. Yeah. There's a Toledo Mud Hens of baseball fame. I'm sorry. You can understand.
Address your letters to Dr. Donner, care of the Uprising. That's where they go. But it's all right. It's one thing if you just say, "Hey, I'm a doctor," and my formal title. That's what I'd appreciate knowing. I've achieved this degree or whatever. But when they sent out the White House the office there's so many qualifications you have to say now, Tim. The unsupported by actual evidence or reality fake office of president-elect that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris set up in order to fool people into thinking that he was president-elect before the Electoral College met.
Do you think? So do you?
I got to get out. I got to get out the story.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So I want to talk about that fake office of president-elect, by the way. I could do a whole hour on that. Yeah, make a note to yourself to circle back around to it. Pretty please.
I'm doing it now.
Is that
making a note and checking it twice?
That fake letterhead from the office of vice president or of president-elect says from Joe and Dr. Jill Biden. So Joe Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, which, by the way, in and of itself is inappropriate, because if you want to go formal, go formal. If you want to go familiar, go familiar. So you can either say Joe and Jill Biden, and if you want to throw the doctor and say Joseph R. Biden Jr. and Dr. Joe. All right, that's the way. If you know, I mean, I'm not an Emily Post graduate, Tim. Why am I telling these people how to address a freaking invitation? Okay, but anyway, so the idea is Biden calls her doctor all the time. She calls herself doctor. In these official things, she's presented as doctor, and she's not a medical doctor. And we have, in terms of hypocrisy, and this is where it's just so delicious. During the Trump administration, Sebastian Gorka, aka Dr. Sebastian Gorka, was made fun of mercilessly by many like popular lefty people because he wanted to be called doctor, and he's not a medical doctor. His Twitter handle said Dr. Gorka, I think, and some other things. Anyway, they made great hay about it. And they don't call Ben Carson, who has saved babies' lives as a pediatric neurosurgeon. I don't know how many he's done, but it's more than zero. So he's better than you and I are, Tim, in terms of saving lives with his bare hands, gloved hands anyway.
Well, he separated he was the first man to separate Siamese twins, for heaven's sake.
You know, Tim, just because he did that, you think that he deserves to be called doctor? How, Jill Biden wrote an essay about it that it was very, in fact, her graduate work, her doctoral thesis was so important that the senior senator from Delaware at the time awarded her the degree and was there when she defended her dissertation. That's how, oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. It was her husband, Joe Biden, who was there. Yes, okay. And he's the one who did it. Unlike,
teacher, can I please?
Was Mrs. Carson, Carson the governor of the state where Ben Carson got his his medical degree from?
Can I please give the subject of her dissertation? Please. Because it's one of the most overlooked and significant issues in the country, but was not discussed in the campaign at all, shockingly, and should have been, because it's something that's pretty much front and center on the minds of millions of people, Scott. And here is the subject of her dissertation: student retention at community colleges. Now, if that's not a worthy subject to be called doctor for, then I don't know what is, because the community colleges are the lifeblood of America, Scott. Without student retention, I mean, where would we be? We would not even be a superpower.
Tim, I am the recipient.
I left you speechless there.
I am the recipient of 3 credit hours from the Camden County Community College, I'll have you know. And they were not able to retain me. I went on to go somewhere else. So,
okay, I rest my case. I rest my case. By the way, this whole office of the president-elect thing, you know what gets me is the idea that he just put it out there because he knew the press wouldn't do the obvious thing, which is to say, what? There is no such thing. He knew that. Imagine if Trump put out office of president-elect 4 years ago, he would have been ridiculed and slammed and attacked and everything else. But here's the thing. So he knew he could get away with it.
Excuse me, Tim, with the artwork and all that stuff.
Everything.
It's not just like a SIG line on an email.
It's
like
what I call
meetings and artists drawn in and like with colors coordinated. I like the yellow with the blue.
I know. It's what I call stolen stature. I mean, I think what he's doing is trying to prop himself up from being the running laugh line that he was through the entire campaign into someone who's actually going to be president. So he has to sort of, puff up his credentials. The president-elect thing is like the doctor thing for his wife, Scott. It's stolen credentials in a sense, because he could have waited. Now, if he did it, it's one thing if he did it now that the Electoral College actually has voted. It's still not an office, but it wouldn't be nearly as illegitimate as doing office of the president-elect before he even is the president-elect.
There is no such thing as office of president-elect. This is the thing that we have to keep saying over and over again.
But do you think, here's a question. Do you think when they were having the discussion about how to handle him being the apparent winner of the election,
do
you think there was anyone in the room that actually said, hey, guys, ladies, there is no such thing as the office of the president-elect. It doesn't exist. Maybe we should think about that before we put it out there on national TV in every single appearance that this guy makes.
I can tell you exactly how it worked. And I don't know how many days a week this phone call is made. Or excuse me, I don't know how many times a day this phone call is made. I assume it's every day, maybe multiple times a day. But here's how it goes. Somebody who's got the right number, and it's not Joe. I'm sure he doesn't have access to it, but one person in that room's got Obama's phone number, okay? When they come around to a big decision like this, Tim, they suss it out, and it's about to kind of peak, and then somebody's like, hold on a second. Let me just check and see, okay? They get on the horn, and the big O tells them whether they should do it or not. And there's probably, I'm going to guess, this is my own invention. There's probably a little condescension in his tone about, no, you shouldn't do that. You should do this like we did back when I was such and so. Okay. And then he tells them how it's going to be. Did you see the...
But I mean, I've seen 15 elections in my lifetime, and I've never seen once anybody ever declare office of president-elect. I mean, how does that go up without it being vetted by the big O or somebody who says, hey, guys, wait a second, that doesn't exist. But the media won't even, they won't even mention that it's not a real thing.
A pediatric neurosurgeon who's involved in politics, they refuse to call him doctor. And a woman who has an advanced degree in education awarded basically by her husband at the time on an insignificant, Tim, she's called doctor, and that's the reality of the New York Times, the Washington Post's famous deceased editor whose name is escaping me now. He has a direct quote on this.
You mean Catherine Graham? Ben Bradley?
No. She's the
Ben Bradley.
It might be Ben. But he says, we don't, this is where I should just spend a second looking. I'm not going to look it up though. But it's like, if you don't deliver babies, if you're not going to save somebody, you don't get to be called doctor. And that's the way we do it. Unless, of course, we're writing about, an explosion at a conference of archaeologists. We might say, Dr. Smith and Dr. Schultz and Dr. whatever, right?
I like the one that you used once a while back. You said, if you're at a party and someone falls down and someone looks up and says, is there a doctor in the house? If you can't answer yes, you don't get to be called doctor. Now, that means you don't have to have delivered a baby. There's more than obstetrics to doctoring. But if you can answer that call and attend to someone who's fallen, you get to be called doctor. If you can't, you don't.
What does it say about the person who wants to be regarded as Dr. So-and-so when they know all the people they're telling that to think they're a medical doctor? I'm not talking about in a classroom or in a community college environment, right? I'm talking about, I was talking to my mother. So I wrote for the pages of today's sponsor, Tim, of the Uprising podcast is libertynation.com, your source for conservatarian news and analysis. 24/7, 366. Thank you. And
we'll say the same thing in 2024.
And at libertynation.com, people can see podcasts, they can see written work, they can see all sorts of conservatarian news and analysis. And I had written about Dr. Jill's title demand. And, I was talking to my mom, and I had a really vivid memory of my mother sending me across the street when I was a kid with a pie or a plant or something in my hand, with instructions to greet my neighbor as Dr. So-and-so, because unbeknownst to me, she had just passed, she had successfully defended her thesis, as it happens, as an Ed.D., the same degree that Dr. Jill has. And I went over and I said hi, and I said, I called her doctor, and she laughed. And it was the first time I had ever heard that there was anything other than a kind of medical doctor. And also, that's the last time I ever referred to that person as doctor, because I wasn't their student and I wasn't involved in an academic. And they had that person has a very healthy sense of self-esteem and doesn't, pretend that she's a medical doctor, because she's not. And then my mother was and so we were having a conversation about the issue, and my mother was telling me about somebody else that she knew, and she used to live in a doorman building. And this person who also had so my mother worked in higher education. Anyway, she knew another person who had an Ed.D., and that person would say, when they presented themselves at the front desk to be called upon, like, oh, it's Dr. Smith going to see so-and-so. Like, they want the staff at the hotel or the restaurant or the whatever to give them
one
the
thing
credit.
is, though, if you're managing your career, if you add a doctor to the front of your name, it might add a couple of zeros to your salary. So, I mean, there is sometimes some actual justification other than just
if you're ordering a pizza, Tim, and you add doctor and you have a social science degree, even if you have a medical degree, one of these quotes from somebody at Stanford, I thought it was a great quote. And they said, when they got to Stanford, they never met I think it was a physicist. He said they never met a physicist that did use the doctor moniker, and they never met a doctor of education that didn't use the moniker.
Yeah, I love that one. I love that one.
This whole idea of
wanting
unearned credit. And then, I have wanted unearned things before. And if I was called on them, I just kind of ducked my head probably and moved on, rather than, pretending that it's somehow righteous. And that's the thing they did. They turned this disgusting, what did you call it? Did you call it this on the C5?
What did I call it?
This is the middle class.
Well, I'm about to make a point sort of related to that. I don't know if it's the exact same language, but, people talk about Social Security, but you know what?
Yeah, this
demonstrates social insecurity to an incredible degree by the Bidens. I mean, Joe Biden has to put up a fake office, president-elect, in order to increase his stature, even though it was just elected president, for heaven's sake, or supposedly
like so. That should be enough, right?
And his wife has to go around using that honorific, which, I thought she was kind of a nice person. But, when you really think about the response to the piece in the Wall Street Journal, and the guy got shouted down like he was just, he was.
Yeah, let me summarize for people who don't know.
Yeah.
This started with a piece by a guy called Joseph Epstein in the Wall Street Journal. And the piece basically said, is there a doctor in the White House? Well, there shouldn't be, or no, and a letter to, basically an open letter to Dr. Jill Biden to say, please don't use the doctor because you're not a medical doctor. And he was roundly attacked. And of course, as one of these ocean kind of waves of attacks on the left at Northwestern University, he's an older man now. I think he's 80 something, 85, but his university, basically disowned him by hiding him from their website, lists of who they're.
I mean, it was just unbelievable. But
and they made it out like it was an anti-woman attack. So that was how they couldn't say, hey, she deserves to be called doctor because she's. So they just said, well, you would never do this if this was a man, and that's part of what makes that attack on Dr. Sebastian Gorka so funny, because he is a man, and of course they did attack him for that same thing.
Well, you act like like it's surprising, or that their standards aren't double on everything. But you can't let this conversation go without displaying what I think may be the best single title of an article on libertynation.com this entire year. We come all the way to mid to late December before we get what I think has got to be the most side-splitting headline of an LN article this year. So why don't you tell us what it is, since it's your article?
What what do Dr. Seuss and Dr. Biden have in common?
I just, you just can't beat that with a stick.
If you need medical advice, they're both about as good. Had to say,
That's, that is basically it. Now,
to be a fly on the wall, Tim, where somebody announces themselves as doctor, like, at the restaurant for the reservation or whatever. And then I would love to just be a fly on the wall when somebody collapses on the floor and they say, doctor, please. And they say, oh, no, I can only opine about community college retention rates. I'm not.
But I will say one thing, when I was growing up, I had a godfather in New York who's a doctor, and he was big in the medical community. And he would, I'll never forget one time I went into a restaurant. Now, this guy had operated on a lot of people who were famous and whatever, but he walked in there and immediately he was overrun with these people who just, doctor. Oh, how are you, doctor?
Right,
Good to have you, doctor. Would you like your usual table, doctor?
Right.
And then everybody walked by, doctor, hello, how are you, doctor, doctor, and look, he wasn't famous, but he was a significant surgeon, doctor, but
it sounds like he was living right, Tim. He had a regular table at a restaurant. Just that alone is something we can all aspire to, right?
Yes, yeah, thank you. That's true. Oh, those simple days of actually just going to a restaurant, ordering and eating.
Yeah. One day.
How soon do you think that'll come back?
My lament as a gastronome and fan of fine dining, Tim, is not for a good while will it get back up to pre-COVID levels. And I don't mean in terms of the access to those establishments, but I think a really good restaurant, the higher level you go, the more this is true. It's like a watch, all these little parts that are moving together in concert to make this one thing happen. Your food to come out, as it should, and the experience to be as it should. And you just can't stop and start. And how many people do they have to train and retrain for these jobs that are, complicated in terms of at this time you should be doing this and then looking for that. And the next time, this is what you do. So what is it, 2020? I say 2023, maybe we got to get a decent meal in this country.
Oh, jeez. Well, that's encouraging. Here's something else that's really encouraging.
You can get takeout now that's worth, it's okay to eat. So don't worry about that.
True. It's takeout nation now.
Well, at least where we are. I don't know. I guess it's banned in some places. It's like not even worth it for them to do that.
Pretty soon, Governor Cuomo is going to say that eating is a health hazard, and you won't be able to do that either unless you have a mask on, which of course makes it a little difficult to eat. But before we leave the subject of the Bidens.
Oh no, we're not. This is a single subject podcast, Tim.
Oh, okay. We need to go with this now because sometimes people don't listen to the whole thing, and they'd hate to have them miss this in the event that they.
Oh, you're not going to bump. You're not going to bump the line with your clip, Tim.
We're going to
tease it and then let them wait for.
What about somebody, Scott, who's listening to the podcast and then gets taken at gunpoint and can't continue listening? He will have missed this.
It's just something for them to anticipate when they eventually reach freedom.
As long as you give me my one sound clip, I'm happy.
Now, the best sound clip, Tim, is the interview with Colbert and Biden with Jill. Tell me, please, that you haven't seen this.
I have not.
Oh, fantastic! All right.
Oh, really?
So stand by here. I'm gonna
stop. I'm verklempt. I'm overcome with emotion at the.
How did Joe get the honor to extend that degree to her? I wonder.
God, and if you're watching it, I mean, and you've seen Biden, but you look at him. I mean. Let me just put it out there. Can you believe this guy's going to be president? I mean,
you got to play the rest of that clip, Tim. You play the rest of that clip and listen to Colbert. Okay, ask him if he wanted to get violent with the people who were criticizing. Well, I'll have to say doctor now because I don't want Joe Biden to hurt me like he threatened to hurt Corn Pop back in the day. So please go ahead and. She has to talk Joe down from truthfully admitting that his anger at people criticizing Jill Biden for using the doctor honorific inappropriately was that he wanted to commit physical violence against him. This is the president-elect, Joseph R. Biden.
And, Trump never even intimated that with all his bombast and everything.
Well,
he never said anything like that, and he never would. And if he did, can you imagine if he had said, what Biden said there? But what's even sadder than
Orange man bad, Tim. Orange man bad.
Here's the thing about that's most depressing about that clip is the fact that Stephen Colbert has
he's
become
our nation's, he's our nation's finest
newsman.
He's like the Walter Cronkite. He is the Walter Cronkite of the new generation, Tim.
Self-proclaimed. Him and people like Jimmy Kimmel, they've taken over a stuff that's supposed to be comedy, and now it's pure politics. That's
because
disgusting.
If they won't sit down with actual journalists, right, then they're only sitting down with comedians. This is the Jon Stewartification, by the way, of the media. He was the first one that kind of took away the power from the actual news side to the comedy side.
But I will say that Jon Stewart at least was very clever, and he was funny a lot of the time, even if you didn't agree with what he was saying. I mean, he was truly funny. Stephen Colbert is just snark and just hatred for Trump. And I mean, it's
you get an unfunny, also non-keen political analysis. So that's what Stephen Colbert gives you. His success, to say that it baffles and boggles my mind, Tim, it baffles and boggles my mind. I do not understand the appeal. I totally understood Jon Stewart's appeal. I don't get it for Colbert, though.
I don't get it for Colbert. I don't really get it for Kimmel. The only guy left, and I've said this a few times, but the only guy left who doesn't seem political, sometimes he's sort of forced into being it, but Jimmy Fallon is the only one that doesn't seem interested in scoring political points. He'll go out there and make fun of Trump. He'll make fun of Biden, but he's on a short leash now too, because these executives have all become so woke, so fake woke, that, they don't even let their hosts decide to have on a guest that might offend some of their left-wing viewers, who I imagine, by the way all this program is going, I guess it's only left-wingers that watch late-night TV, because certainly nobody that thinks like you or me is going to watch that garbage.
Also, people who have sadly horrible senses of humor, because if you listen to Jimmy Kimmel, he's abandoned
there's no sense of humor.
When you put the political point in the primary position rather than the joke, boy, they both really suffer, I think. And Kimmel could own me in terms of how to make a joke, but not in how to make a political point or understand public policy. And
what's sad too is that, I watched a couple of Kimmel shows before Trump came on the scene 5.5 years ago. And, he actually was pretty funny. And he's liberal and all that.
Well, wait a second. Hold on just a second. I think Kimmel, when at his best, is hilariously funny. And here's the worst part. Unlike perhaps Jon Stewart or perhaps Stephen Colbert, he knows very well serious conservatives. Jimmy Kimmel was the co-host of Win Ben Stein's Money for years on Comedy Central. Ben Stein is one of the most sort of articulate writers about mainstream conservatism, that there were for a long time. I know that he knows Ben Stein very well, and he knows his conservative arguments, and the idea that, because Kimmel's one of these really horribly disgusting persons who doesn't just say, for instance, I oppose your position on gun control because I think we should be more restrictive. It's, you want babies to die. That's right. His position.
He goes to the end. He's one of these, he's one of these people that is a conversation stopper.
Yeah.
And when he says things that are meant to end a discussion, end a conversation, because the other person has no recourse when someone simply lets their emotion guide all of their judgment. It's the same thing in sports, like in the NBA. LeBron James, who was just named Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year, not because of his talent, but because he's a social justice warrior. But if you watch him jumping on the bandwagon after George Floyd and some of these other killings, high profile, The guy is totally uninformed. All he does is get up there and repeat the Black Lives Matter talking points without any depth of knowledge at all. Can't take questions to discuss the particulars of a case like Breonna Taylor, any kind of nuance other than it was cops that shot somebody black, and therefore that's the only fact that matters. And LeBron James is another example of someone who we watch, or people watch. I don't watch the NBA, but they watch to see him play basketball, not to make statements about social justice. And it was, I thought, the same thing for comedy on TV, but apparently not anymore.
This is something that is done all the time by those on the left who have the power of presenting, that they present the famous person who's famous for one thing or well known for one thing and respected for one thing, and also as a leftist, and they present it as like they're respected for that leftist thing, right? In other words, the only thing that LeBron James does extraordinarily well is play basketball. I mean,
it's like the talent. It's like
by the way, he was also, I have to give credit where it's due. He was one of the best ever guest hosts on Saturday Night Live. I encourage everybody to go ahead and watch it. That was before he became, this political activist. But listen, for him, it's like all win, right? He gets money, he gets accolades, he's a hero. The virtue signaling goes off the charts.
And you know what? Look, he's a role model for millions of Chinese kids. Because that's what the NBA
I don't think he's
is.
a role model for him. He's putting money. He's putting food in their mouths.
I was being
right?
sarcastic.
Oh, okay. I was actually being literal. He's generating revenue for the Chinese Communist Party, right? That's the NBA's content partner. And let's talk about, Tim, Liberty Nation's content partner, whatfinger.com. Whatfinger.com is a top quality aggregator website that people should visit multiple times throughout the day to see what's happening and click on curated stories that inform what's going on around the country and around the world. And people can stay tuned to some news stories from libertynation.com as they go ahead and visit whatfinger.com.
Very, very clever segue there. Now,
Tim,
you're going to let me run
that's a sponsor read, Tim. That's not a segue.
Now, very nice.
We're gonna
read. Thanks
we're gonna
for
say
schooling me on radio. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Your doctorate of podcast science. And by the way, Tim, I didn't give you some rinky dink studies doctorate. It's not a doctorate in podcast studies. That's the hard science doctorate. Okay.
Right. That's the.
I went above and beyond for you.
Right.
I'm trying to help you out a little bit. Okay.
Now, am I going to get to play this Biden soundbite before we expire here? Because people have to hear. Because if they haven't heard it, they have to hear this.
Tim, I will just say this.
Their next president of the United States.
I haven't done. And I want to say I'm sorry to the audience. I value them more than they'll know and appreciate them. I haven't done the hard work of actually reading Dr. Joe Biden's dissertation, but I will give it a college try at least before the next uprising. So I just wanted to make that promise. And let's go ahead.
You promise not to read it, right?
I don't mean aloud on the podcast.
Because then you're going to have to talk about it, and I just don't know.
That's the other thing. So when I wrote the article, I actually said that I think that's probably an important topic in the world of education, right? Community college retention seems important enough, but some of the people, the few pieces I've read where people have actually read it say no, not only. That's the other thing too, where the double downing happens. Then you're just like, it's apparently not even a well done thesis. But I'll reserve that, and let's go ahead and dive into your clip, please.
Okay, so let's just say, once the Electoral College cast their ballots for Biden, he did sort of a second victory speech now that it's official. And here he is, folks, your next president of the United States.
And once again, in America, the rule of law, more Americans voted this year than have ever voted in the history of the United States. Votes counted. President Pence received when they won in 2016. Excuse me. Or dispute the results margin 4 years ago. And yet, I thank them. And I'm convinced we can work together for the good of the nation. You know, in this battle for the soul of America, democracy prevailed. We, the people, voted to unite, to heal. I will be president for all Americans.
I have a pet peeve when I'm talking to somebody and they don't just say, hang on a minute, and then do the business of clearing their throat, okay, or situating themselves, but instead go on with this perpetual needing to sneeze, cough, swallow, whatever.
I mean, you can't make a victory speech to declare victory for the presidency of the United States without coughing like 185 times in the course of the speech. I mean, you know, let me just say this. For the last 4 years, 4 years since he was president, we are bombarded every single day with leftists and the media wing of the Democratic Party telling us that Donald Trump is an embarrassment to America. Well, what exactly was that? What exactly was that?
They're like, honestly, that thing is just ridiculous. These other things, threatening with violence, people who don't want to call his wife by her title. You know, we're just going to go into, I mean, we had to call Michelle Obama stunning and brave for 8 years, and she's neither, right? And now we're going to have to call Joe Biden a doctor for, I don't know, how long until Kamala's in there? 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
But you're already used to calling her doctor. We've been talking about it for the last year. We were on the cutting edge of the doctor issue with Jill Biden. As on so many other issues, Scott, the Uprising is ahead of the curve.
And LibertyNation.com and the Uprising are both ahead of the curve on the Hunter Biden laptop and corruption story. And I encourage everybody to visit today's sponsor, LibertyNation.com, to read more about those topics and more. Dr. Timothy Elting Donner, thank you so much for joining us on this Uprising.
Dr. Cosenza, I bow to you.
That's it for this edition of the Uprising. Remember to hit Liberty Nation News for original articles, the Rabbit Hole podcast, and our signature television program, The Conservative Five. Just go to libertynation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Scott Cosenza. Thanks for watching. This program is a product of libertynation.com, conservative news where truth matters.
We are the Uprising.